The Commission, I think, has performed very well, and it has performed very well in preserving the integrity of the single market. I think it was not obvious that under the stress that we were, there would not be too many barriers put into place. And if I look at the single market, I can't say that it has performed badly at all. There's been some barriers. Yes, Jordi, there's been a few barriers, but the barriers, I think, given the sharpness of the decline in GDP, of manufacturing activity that declined by 15%, I think it has been rather limited. It's true that the main instrument used by the competition has been the most forceful instrument, has been competition policy, in particular the control of state aids. We know what has happened in the financial sector. We know what has happened in the automobile sector. And if I had, in a sense, a criticism to make here, is that the Commission was naked. It had only the instrument of competition policy. I think it has used it very well, but it has used it also because it also revealed the fact that other instruments were lacking. When it came to the financial sector, yes, the instrument of competition was used for those banks that benefited from state aids, but there was not really in place a financial sector regulation and supervision mechanism that needed to be there. So in a sense, the competition policy instrument was the second best. Was I think very well used, but for want of a better one. If you look at the automobile sector, again, it's the competition policy instrument that is used. One would like, in a sense, that one use sometimes for economists it's a dirty word, for me also, industrial policy, but the capacity to deal with problem sectors. It's clear, and it should have been clear before that the automobile sector was facing major problems. And competition policy is not by and of itself going to be able to solve the problem. Now let me come to my conclusions, and I will have occupied, I think, all of the 30 minutes that I was assigned. My conclusion is in the 4 points. Number one, remember the assignment of policies that I described at the beginning, what is today at the EU level, what is today at the national level. I think what the crisis has clearly shown is that we will need, at least in the financial area, a different assignment. And this is what is being done today, hopefully, by providing at the EU level a capacity for supervision. One is yet to see exactly what that capacity will be, what that authority will be, but I think Ada Turner, who is the chair of the FSA in the UK, I think he put it very well, and coming from the UK, I think it cannot be viewed as suspicious. Talking about the situation, he said, for financial regulation and supervision, either we will need sounder arrangements at the EU level, we will need greater degree of economic integration, that is transfer supervision partly to the EU level, or one will have to admit that supervision is kept at the national level, but that will imply that we will have a less open single market. So either we keep the single market and we preserve the free flow of capital, and that requires that indeed we move we delegate some authority at the EU level, or it's going to be very, very difficult. Question, are there other areas besides, is the crisis telling us that there are other areas that have been assigned so far at the national level that should be transferred at the EU level? I leave this as a question. Second question, Europe clearly needs, I think, a better crisis prevention capability. The main tool of crisis prevention, in a sense, has been the Stability and Growth Pact. And I won't say that the Stability and Growth Pact has not delivered anything. I think it has delivered some, but it has delivered much too little. To focus the examination of the situation of countries on the deficit has clearly proved to be much, much too narrow. We have seen a number of countries that had deficit positions that were quite favorable and that are finding themselves now in unsustainable positions. And again, I don't think there is really a name to list those countries. They are really well known. I think one does need to move to a situation where there is an authority. There is really an authority in charge of coordination. Coordination without a real authority, and what kind of authority it should be and what that authority is, I think remains to be seen. But I think crisis prevention has not worked as well as it should. Crisis management, well, we did not have a proper crisis management. I think we managed pretty well in Europe in an ad hoc manner. There was ad hoc response. That's why I said at the beginning that my view is not that we did very poorly. Compared to what I had expected, given how poorly prepared we were, I think we delivered not badly, but we were poorly prepared. That's a fact. And finally, and linked to this, Europe will need to fix its external representation on those matters. Quite rightly, we are seeing that now global institutions, the G20, the IMF, are playing a very, very important role in the matters of finance and economy. And Europe finds itself poorly represented. You know that, and I will conclude with this, you know that at the G20, Europe today is appearing on 7 different seats. There are the 4 large countries that were the part of the G7. There are also 2 countries, additional countries, that in a sense pushed their way, Spain and the Netherlands, and there is obviously the Community Commission. So out of the 20 or 22 countries at the G20, 7 seats are occupied by Europe. In terms of our credibility, it's not exactly what one would wish. Thank you very much.
Professor Mas-Colell is the responsible. We are here now as a president of the GSE. You have. It's your turn.
Thank you very much. Usual introductions, honorable, etc., friends. I was going to do 2 things in this speech. One, in these words. One is to say, one was to reflect about what we are doing. I was going to say that we are training economic analysts, and then I was going to explain what an economic analyst is, but I will let it, I think I will let it to the trial by doing. By the end of the year, what matters, the students will know what an economic analyst is. And that way we'll have some material for next year. But I cannot not give the thanks I was planning to give. So let me do this part and therefore give some thanks to all present for being here, to Professor André Sapir for making this special trip and for the splendid dissertation we had just heard. I had written a splendid dissertation before hearing it, but I know him well enough. To the members of our board for their continuing support, and particularly today to Caixa Catalunya for lending us their auditorium. To our academic patrons, the UAB and the UPF, for their academic endorsement and validation.